Hello again. Having skipped ahead, I've changed my ideas a little bit about what I was going to do with the printer, and I've actually made this rough and ready kind of a platformy thing for it, which actually doubles as a carrying device, whereby you can use the carrier for the filament spool as a kind of a handle, so you can actually carry the whole thing from one place to another. Because the actual printer is so very portable, obviously by making this I've made it a little less portable, but it just means that you can take the spool holder and the whole printer, including the power supply and everything, anywhere. You can move it from room to room, or take it outside if you want to put it in a shed, if you want to print, for instance, outside in a shed or something. I've made a few changes to what my plans were for my videos as well. What I'll do is I'll tell you about what I've done with the print bed. I've actually removed the original print bed and made another print bed for it from an Ender 3 magnetic bed. I actually got a magnetic bed and sticker to convert the ordinary printer into a magnetic one, or magnetic bed, but in this case what I did was to cut the magnetic bed to the same, or roughly the same shape as this one. As you can see, I haven't made a particularly good job with it, but I've been printing with it over the last couple of days and it works just as well as this bed, in the sense that you don't need any heat to get good adhesion with PLA onto it. And it provides a better underside surface for the prints, because what tends to happen with this one, because it's got some little it's like a kind of a perforated sheet, the actual bottom part of the print actually sinks into the bed, so that anything on the bottom of the print won't be reproduced at all, whereas on the standard Ender 3 print surface, the bottom surface is produced faithfully. I have tried a few more benches since then. I haven't quite got the hang of it. I tried this silk PLA from Amazon again, but I think the silk PLA is quite a bit more difficult to print with the normal PLA, so I think I might go back to a roll of standard PLA. It looks nice, but I think it's harder to actually get good results with. However, immediately printing on this surface, I was able to get the text underneath the benchy, but it still isn't particularly good, and I think that's probably because of the difficulty with printing with the silk PLA. So I have got another roll of standard PLA, so I'm going to go back to using that. So you can see that the base is quite roughly made. It's just made from some scrap wood that I happen to have available from another project, and it's quite rough and ready, but I was thinking you guys who are handy with carpentry might be able to actually make a kind of a drawer in the bottom. I haven't done so. I just wanted to make a platform that I could fix the supports for the reel to, so that it was quite strong and didn't move after it was assembled, of course. As you can see, I've used a 15mm plumbing pipe for the actual spindle, and I've used some Jubilee clips to fit the pipe into the supports, so that it can be taken off relatively easily to fit the new roll of filament, or to fit new rolls of filament when needed. But it's actually very useful because, of course, it's strong enough to be used as a handle, and so that the whole printer and kit and caboodle can be moved about as needed. I was going to make a spool holder, but I decided against that because I've come up with this design instead. Obviously it's a bit rough and ready, but it could be copied in a better way with someone who's more skilled at carpentry than myself, into such a way, as I say, that you could have a drawer underneath or some other storage. Certainly you need somewhere to put the power supply where it's not going to fall when you move the printer. It's nothing to stop it moving on the plate, of course, apart from gravity. As you can see, I've put some cable ties to actually stop the reel moving. I've used this before and it works quite well. The advantage of the cable ties is that when you want to take the reel off, you can simply coil them up inside and pass the reel over the top of it, and it does work quite well, and it's a good stopgap. Obviously, in the fullness of time, I could print some collars to put on there, but for the time being, I think it's sufficient to enable the spool to stay central on the rod. I'm aware that some of you like to plug in via the USB socket to get the printer controlled by a computer, but in my experience, I haven't done that. I can only say that, to be honest, I haven't ever done that, and I just generally prefer to use the SD card. So what I've done is to purchase one of these SD card readers, which will actually save your it will save your SD card slot from being potentially damaged with repeated insertion of the card. It hasn't actually happened to me yet, but I always worry if I've had to reinsert a card into a reader multiple times. So I usually use these extenders on my printers, and up until now I've just done something very rough and ready, that I just stuck the reader on with blue tack or something like that. With this printer, I decided to make a bracket for the card reader, rather than just having it hanging about or fixed to the printer with blue tack or anything like that. And I've got some stills to show you how I would normally go about designing something from scratch. I think a lot of people, when they're 3D printing, may be quite intimidated by the idea of designing something from scratch, but I can say, speaking from my own experience, that that's one of the most satisfying things that you can do, because you've actually produced something useful from your own ingenuity, and that's a very, for me personally, that's a very good reason. In fact, that is the reason why I started being interested in 3D printing when I first discovered it as a concept, because I wanted to design things, usually in my case for cars and things like that, where I wanted to make something to a little mount to take a phone or something like that. That was my original reason for wanting to actually do 3D printing at all, and I had lots of projects in mind for many years, and I couldn't actually bring them into reality because I didn't have any way to make the items in any other materials, because obviously 3D printing, it's like your vision straight into the three-dimensional material. As you can see with this stand, my actual carpentry ability is quite poor, and I can't make things in wood. I can't make things in metal so easily as you can with 3D printing. It's such a brilliant technology for bringing the ideas you have into reality in 3 dimensions. So to get to the point, I'm going to design and make a bracket for this card reader to fit to the printer, so that hopefully I can conceal the ribbon cable and also mount the card reader. I've got some stills which I'm going to show you, which will show you the measurements I took to actually facilitate making of the bracket. Usually when I'm designing something from scratch, I'll usually take a bunch of photos and dimension them up in a very quite crude way, but what happens is that it gives you a kind of reference point that you can always keep with you, because I will take photos on my phone and then mark them up with the measurements, and then when I'm doing the designing, I can quickly refer back to them. I think it's a pretty good way of doing things, but it's not precise. It's not precise in the way that some people might like. I do tend to cut corners sometimes when I can, to get the result, rather than spend a long time mulling over the measurements and so on and so forth. I usually try and jump ahead as quickly as possible into a viable design. So that's to come. That's in the project which I was planning to do. Before, I said I was planning to make a bracket for the printer to hold a 1 kilo roll of filament. I've decided, as you can see, to use this rough and ready stand come reel holder come handle to make the printer more portable. It makes it slightly larger, but of course with this you can just unplug it quickly and take it from room to room or from location to location with all of the filament, etc., all fully installed, so it's all ready to go, you know, when you get to your destination. Of course you could put it in the car or take it with you. Just to make a few points about the printer and advantages of it, which I wrote down after I'd had a chance to think about it a bit more. It's actually really rather good, and although you probably think I would say that, but I've not got any vested interest in this. It's just for my own interest, and because, as I say, it was too tempting to get it. Yeah. So basically what I did was I wrote down all the advantages I could think for the printer. If you're thinking about buying it, I'm not going to really look too much at the disadvantages, but of course the fact that the body's made of ABS plastic means it's not the stiffest printer I've had, because most of the printers I've got are actually aluminium extrusion and they're very, very stiff. This one isn't quite like that, but I don't think it really makes a huge difference actually. The print come out of it are still pretty good quality. I'm just going to go through the advantages as I see it here. Now, what I've written down, it's portable. Unlike other printers, which I've talked about just now, they've got big heavy metal frames which makes them sort of difficult to move. I'm not saying that they can't be portable, but they're quite big and heavy and also quite fragile, I would say. Another advantage, I'm going to move on to the second advantage, is the magnetic bed, because of course it means you can print right up to the dimensions of the print surface without worrying about clips and so forth, which you might have to do if you didn't have a magnetic bed. Like my other two printers don't have magnetic beds and they need clips. When you take them off, you've got to worry about whether they might get lost or not by the time you come back to print again. Now I'm going to discuss the quality of the print, which is pretty good. I mean, it's not perfect, but I imagine it could be dialed in with a combination of print settings and adjustments. Normally with my printers I've not been too critical or overly critical about quality, and I've just left them unchanged. We talked about bed adhesion, and even despite having changed the bed over to the Creality magnetic bed, I have to report that the adhesion is just as good, and it gives you a better surface finish on the underside of the print. And I was then going to go on to discuss the bed adjustment in the 4 buttons that you get. That's a really good thing, because it means that every time you press the button, the printer is resetting the homing position, so that you never have to worry that it's gone off the homing position as you do with all the other printers that require manual bed adjustment. The amount of noise made by the printer is really rather good. It's better than a lot of bigger printers, but you could say that it's a smaller, you know, the movements are smaller, the motors are smaller, so it should be quieter. But it is pretty quiet. Now what I've done inadvertently by putting it on this surface is that I've actually put it on the top of a drum effectively, so I need to look into how I can deaden that sound again. It sounds like it's on a drum now, so it's made it a lot louder, and I need to think about how to adjust that. I was thinking about putting it on a silicone mat. Now the 8th advantage was the fact that it's good for people starting out, because if you're new to 3D printing, you might not know whether it's really for you, and you might not want to invest, say, £200 or £300 to buy a printer if you don't really know whether it's for you. So it's a good proof of concept for people who are not really sure whether they really want to get involved with big bucks to buy a bigger machine. And it goes back to how easy it is to assemble, and the fact that you can get up and running with minimal expertise as long as you follow the instructions which the Easy 3D company have helpfully provided for you. And I've gone on to discuss that a bit further underneath, saying that the simple assembly is better, again, for someone with limited experience, because I do see a lot of comments when I look on forums and things like that about people who've bought other printers which are self-assembly, and they run into problems themselves because it's too complicated. At this stage in their knowledge, they don't really quite have the knowledge to actually do it, and they run into problems sort of assembling them and then sort of getting them to print in the first place. Some people, it seems, struggle for months and months without being able to get good bed adhesion. As I say, with this printer, it needs no heat and the adhesion is absolutely first class. As long as you get the tramming done correctly, there's no problem with any adhesion at all. And it's so easy to do because the instructions tell you what to do. You don't have to move the print head about manually. You don't have to use the self-leveling, and then other issues come into play as well, such as the cleanliness of the print head. Because of course, if you go trying to tram the bed and the print head isn't clean, then that's another issue that people don't seem to mention very often. That you do need to clean the print head before you go leveling the printer, which is something which I'll go on to discuss possibly. But basically, I just heat the printer up, which it's easier to do with the loading sequence. You just flick the switch at the bottom backwards, and then you do the loading sequence. It heats up. You then turn it back to the standard position, wait for the filament to cool, and then I just rub the finger of a gardening glove underneath the nozzle, and that will then clean it off as it's cooling, so that eventually you'll get to a very clean surface. Then you can go ahead and do your leveling. Yeah, so the simple assembly. It's easy for someone who has relatively little knowledge of 3D printing to come along and assemble it and be able to print from it almost straight away. Within about 30 minutes, I would estimate someone can take this in a box, assemble it, and then be printing. My 10th point does say it goes on to it would provide an overview of 3D printing for someone who wanted to test out to see whether they are interested, because you can learn everything. You can learn 3D design, you can learn about 3D printers itself, you can learn about the technologies and materials involved with minimal outlay and in fact minimal time, because if you obtain a printer that requires self-assembly and it takes you ages to assemble it, then when you do assemble it you can't get any adhesion from it. With this one, you just assemble it basically, and then within a few minutes, say 30 to 40, maybe an hour, you can be printing something, and it's really that good and that simple. I think I'm now going on to discuss again what I've said. Overall, it's good to gain experience without a big investment. That's what I would say. A big investment of anything, your time, money, and frustration as well, because it's no frustration 3D printing this. Obviously, you've got to understand that the print volume is very small, but in order to actually gain a good understanding of 3D design, the materials, etc., having a small print volume is no handicap, because actually then you can go on to, once you've learnt everything you need to, you can then go on and buy a bigger printer and print bigger items, knowing what you're doing, A, what you're doing, B, what you're getting into. Having basically a good understanding without a big investment. So that's basically a rundown of what I think of the printer. Obviously, I've still got things to do. I've still got projects in mind. I'm going to be doing the TPU at some point. I'm sorry I haven't done it yet, but I'm still really sort of getting to grips with my understanding of the printer. So I hope you found my points interesting. I was sort of a bit rambling, of course, but I've introduced the idea of producing a platform to put the printer on, which makes it a bit more portable and more useful, and also supports the 1 kilo spool of filament, which you can't otherwise do. I've also introduced the idea of taking a Creality magnetic printing bed and cutting it to fit the shape of this printer, and I've also confirmed that it works without any problems. It sticks to the bed. It's very, exactly the same as the original bed, sticks to it just as well, and the print quality is arguably better, because the bottom side of the print is actually better quality. And also I've introduced the idea of the card reader, which I'm going to be going on to design the bracket for, and which I will cover in greater detail. I will look at the way I designed it, software I used to design it, and how I then printed it out on this printer, because I'm going to print it out in PLA on this printer. I'm quite convinced that the PLA will be up to the job. Normally I would go straight to PETG for any mechanical parts, anything that needs to be strong, but in this case I'm going to push the boundaries and see if PLA can actually be used to produce something that's strong. I might need to anneal it, but what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to print the, when I've designed it, I'm going to print the item out and see if PLA is up to the job of, of being strong when it's needed. Because obviously it's going to be sitting on there, and you're going to be pushing it against it with your finger every time you put the SD card into the machine. So we're just going to see how that goes. Well, I'll be going into that in future videos. I hope you found the material which I've given you interesting, and I hope you found it useful. If you have found the video interesting and useful, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. Also consider hitting the bell to keep up to date with my new content, which I will be trying to bring out as often as I can. But I'd like to try what I'd like to do when I may not bring out a video every week, but I'd like to try and put as much content in it for you as I can. That's what I'm trying to do here. Okay, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.